Hey everyone, welcome back to Bench Racer X here on RacerXOnline.com. I'm Kellen Brauer along with Donnie Southers talking about some stuff from the San Francisco Supercross. I was in attendance this past week and Donnie, you were not. So first of all, mud races from the TV. How was your experience watching everyone slosh around? Could you keep track of stuff?
No, and that's the worst part is that you cannot keep track of it on TV. And I'm sure there were so many moments that when you get to pick and choose wherever on the track, but they're always following, big names and leaders, rightfully so, because everybody was crashing. So it wasn't like, we were watching them roll around.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted out on Sunday, there was a moment that Supercross posted of Ferrandis and Webb making contact and like totally missed the context before that, which is Webb got sideways, went off the track, missed an entire lane, then jumped back on. Ferrandis cross jumped him to make sure like, hey, you can't pass me from off the track. And yeah, so there's a lot of silly moments, I feel like, from San Francisco. But today we're going to talk about three guys that really had nights that they would rather forget. Three guys in the 250 class that more or less you could say their title hopes, I guess, are kind of over a little bit. We'll debate that. First guy we're going to talk about is Joe Shimoda, Honda HRC, who won his heat race, Donnie. Everything looked like it was going well. Main event, he starts inside the top 5, I think, and then has a fall. And then 2 corners later, his main event is over. From the perspective of just watching this on TV, what was your reaction to seeing Shimoda pushing his bike off the track and already having a DNF on the cards?
It was so many emotions because like I'm a Joe fan and I have been since he turned pro, and him coming out and getting the heat race, I was like, yes, exactly what he needs after I say bad A1, he got 4th. But then him falling over in the main and you're just like utter disappointment in Joe, and then it was 2 turns later and the bike blows, and then you're like, well, I guess it didn't matter if he fell or not. Mm-hmm. I kind of give him a little bit of leeway on the fall, but man, it was heartbreaking from the first section of the track.
Yeah, I mean, really, he had a good start. The heat race went so well, you figure it could be a night that Shimoda wins and kind of gets right back into this title fight. Instead, he's 29 points, I believe, out of it. So after the race, he said, it was nice to get a good start in the heat race, get some battles, and still get the win. Obviously, the main event didn't go how I imagined. I got a good start, but tipped over on the straightaway. 2 turns later, I had a mechanical and couldn't finish the race. It's not where we wanted to be after tonight, but I'm looking forward to next weekend. So yeah, it was a mechanical issue. It wasn't like, Shimoda was just like willingly pushing his bike off the track. I think everyone realizes a mechanical issue. It sounds like after the race, Lars Lindstrom is still kind of trying to figure out. It seems maybe electrical related based on the early tip over. And then after Shimoda pushed his bike off the track, and I'm not sure if they showed this on TV, for like 5-6 laps, Lars had come down out of the manager's tower and walked over to Shimoda in the infield. And they were both looking at the bike. They were pressing the button on the handlebars, trying to get the bike started again and stuff like that. So they couldn't quite figure it out. Obviously, with the water and the mud and everything, there's always a chance it gets into a spot it wasn't designed to, especially with an early crash. But yeah, I mean, I feel that this is a freak deal for Shimoda, really. Like, I don't think that anyone looks at it as like, this is clearly Shimoda's fault. Everyone, like, I feel like throughout the day had a fall at some point, and most of their bikes survived. Shimoda has a weird tip over on top of a jump, and his bike does not. But what say you about that, Donnie?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, especially because Joe has this kind of reputation. A lot of fans have said of like, oh, he cracks early under pressure. He'll be great late in the year and bad here. And this, and it just happened to the worst guy. If this scenario would happen to anybody else, there'd be way less, condemning it, I guess. So it's definitely a bummer. I also heard electrical from, I think it was Kiefer tweeted something about that, but just a freak thing. And it's a bad look again for Factory Honda, who has kind of taken the reins as being the top team in the pits right now, to be the one to have a stupid, silly mechanical in the main event.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were not the only ones. There was a lot of guys that had mechanical issues throughout the night, and another guy that did was the other heat race winner, Ryder DiFrancesco, who kind of surprised all of us. Bakersfield, California kid goes out and wire-to-wire wins his first ever heat race in only his second start. Before we get into his issue, Donnie, were you surprised? Ryder D, California kid, wins a heat race? I was.
Yeah, like, where does this come from? Like, he acts like he's out here riding the mud all the time.
Yeah, I mean, starts are the hugest part of a mud race, and he got the start in the heat race. Did not get the start in the main event. He was kind of caught up in some of the first turn chaos. I don't know that he actually fell, but I did get a chance to talk to him after the race. And for those of you that were watching on TV, you maybe never even saw this, but he was like almost dead-ish last through the first corner, and I think he made it about a lap and a half and was actually getting into the like mid pack already in just a lap and a half. He was making some good moves. He was making some good progress. And then I believe on that second lap of the race through the rollers, his bike went kaput a little bit, and he just kind of pulled off to the side ish of the rollers, which were the whoops, and was looking down and trying to figure it out. And this is what Ryder D himself had to say about that situation.
Thought I was in first gear and I kept shifting up, and the bike like never was going anywhere. So I don't know what happened.
So yeah, it sounds like maybe some sort of transmission issue, Donnie. It maybe, fried clutch a little bit early in the main event, just getting caught up in all the water and mud behind everybody. But yeah, another mechanical issue for him. I know we just talked about it with Joe, like you have to get these bikes to the finish line. But again, so early in the race, I feel that's almost more of a freak deal for Ryder D.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that on the Pulp Show, Cade was talking about, and obviously Privateer's a little bit different, but he was like, there was no time to work on the bikes really. Like it was so treacherous, and they were spending so much time cleaning the bikes that maybe when it came to replacing the clutch before the main, maybe it was just something silly, something just didn't get done right, which would obviously be a bad look on the gas team. But it's as freak as can be, I think, Ryder D's and Shimoda's situation for that matter, both being first lap.
Yeah, and another thing to consider is that these guys all had to get their bikes pressure washed inside of the stadium. It was mandated that they could not leave the stadium without having their bikes clean of mud. And so I don't think they could actually pressure wash it back in the pits. And what also could happen, which I didn't clarify with Ryder D or Joe in this situation, but they could have pressure washed in the stadium, got back to the pits, and then realized, oh, there's still some mud in some spots, and then they go in there and they try to clean it with whatever because they can't pressure wash in the pits where they were, and maybe they didn't get everything clean or whatever. Again, I'm not saying that that's what happened, but that's a situation that could have happened to a lot of guys based on having to pressure wash in the stadium and then go and ride through the rain and everything to get back to the pits. Yeah,
and Josh Ellingson, Eli Tomac's mechanic, said that, having all those guys in, I think, the bullpen, everybody was accidentally spraying everybody else, and then you get your bike clean and somebody would sling mud back on it. So, yeah, they were trying to be quick because they need to get to the pits ASAP. So it could have just been, missed a little here and there, and that could have been the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So bummer deal, both Ryder D and Shimoda DNF. And another guy that had a horrible night, didn't actually DNF, finished the main event, but didn't really have much to show for it, was Monster Energy Yamaha Star Racing's Nate Thrasher, who really never had a good day going all day long. A lot of crashes. I think he was still a little banged up, obviously, from the crash the weekend before at Anaheim. So that on top of it, trying to navigate the waters and get through the muddy San Francisco conditions. But I think he crashed 3 or 4 times in the main event, and already with a DNF basically at Anaheim and then a bad result at San Francisco, I think we can fully write off Thrasher is not in contention whatsoever for this title, right, Donnie?
Right, and don't forget that he had to go to the LCQ too, so he had a very long night, and he broke his streak. If you remember 2 years ago, he won his LCQ and then went on to win the main. He was my pick to win the title coming in this year, was Thrasher, so very, very disappointing. And that just kind of brings up the 250 class, being that it is so short. It's only, 9-10 rounds. It reminds me of college football. You can maybe lose one and squeak in if everybody else has one. And Shimoda and Thrasher, they're now down 2. And is that frustrating for them? Disappointing? Absolutely. But that's just how the class is built.
So Thrasher in the Monster Energy Yamaha Star Racing press release said, the day started out well, but it was another tough night for me. It was pretty tough conditions out there, and we struggled a bit. I had to go through the LCQ, which we won, like he said, but unfortunately it was another tough main event with a couple tip overs in the mud. We'll keep fighting, go back to work, and come back stronger in San Diego. So, getting back to recouping from the crash at Anaheim 1 for Thrasher, Donnie. Thrasher won in the Atlanta Supercross. I think it was first ever win. It was one of the wins was in the mud, more or less, right? So I think that Thrasher is a mud guy. Like, I think he can do well in the mud. I think that this was a compound effect of not being 100% and then crashing in the heat race and having to go through the LCQ, left him with a terrible gate pick, and then he has a terrible start in the main event. And then at that point, you're covered in mud, your bike is covered in mud, and if he's already a little bit weak in the arms or the shoulders from the crash at Anaheim 1, picking the bike up 3 times is not the ideal situation either.
No, and obviously he had a terrible gate pick going to the LCQ. He had a terrible start. He was like dead last in front of Shimoda and Ryder D, but he worked his way up to, I think, 10th by lap 4, so he was definitely charging forward, but just bad day all around. I'm sure nobody wishes they could restart 2024 like Nate.
Yeah. Who do you think of the 3 guys that we mentioned here that this result is like the worst for them? Like, they left feeling the worst, that this was like the worst situation that it could be for them?
I think it's got to be Joe. A lot of times, I think we've all forgotten that Ryder D is a rookie, and this is only his second race, so he doesn't care. This is just a year for, growing pains. But Joe came in not just with expectations like Thrasher for himself, but from everybody else too. Going to HRC, taking over the Lawrence's spot where they've dominated the class for years. I think everybody was like, all right, Joe, it's your time now. And it clearly is not.
Yeah, unfortunate situation for Shimoda. We'll see if he can rebound in San Diego as well as Ryder D and Thrasher. And we also hope not a mud race in San Diego. There's a little bit of rain potentially on the docket in the night show, but fingers crossed that cell doesn't quite get there before the main events start. Donnie, thanks for joining me here on another edition of Bench Racer X, talking about some rough main events from San Francisco. Be sure to head to racerxonline.com for all your motocross and supercross news.